Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the week in Jambands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands,
upcoming tours,
and show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Week of March 13th, 2023.
All right, welcome back to the St. Patrick's Day week, Ides of March week edition of All That Jam. How are we doing, Amanda?
Hey, Kevin, I am good. I'm good. I actually completely forgot that it was St. Patrick's Day coming up this week, so thank you for reminding me. That shows you where I'm at these days.
Yes, St. Patrick's Day. I was a bartender, so I spent quite a few behind a bar, but I don't go out on St. Patrick's Day. It is amateur night. People who never drink decide they can have 5 Jamesons, and I figure I stay home. That New Year's, they're the two worst.
I know. I knew that about New Year's with you. Last year by accident, completely ended up taking my son down to Denver Union Station area on St. Patrick's Day or the day of the parade. Totally forgot when the parade ended, so we got to see the tail end of the fun and the cleanup crew, and some very interesting life lessons were had that afternoon as we were walking around.
Yeah, strange holiday, but good for them. And usually you get good bands playing sometimes too. Like I saw Fish on St. Patrick's Day once. I've seen The Dead years and years ago though. I actually saw Fish. I feel like the Dead were playing Philly. They played one night. They played 3 nights in a row, but the middle night I went and saw Fish instead of going to Philly to see The Dead.
Oh,
And
cool.
that happened to be a St. Patrick's Day, so
Oh, that's yeah. I've seen some good shows on or around that time of year, definitely. And I think to some degree it's kind of where you're at and whatnot. But you're right. It's a night where literally anything can and does happen.
and it's a Friday this year, so
That's
watch
great.
out.
Okay, well we'll have to come back next week and maybe debrief a little bit.
So this week there was a interesting cartoon posted, which we're going to talk about a little later, about the nexus between jazz and funk. We have an interview coming up with Walter Salas-Humara, who is the brains behind the Silos, which were a huge band back in the day. Wilco, a lot of the Americana bands owe a lot to them. And we also have Amanda's top 3 stories coming up. So this week I did nothing but watch Goose for days on end. Did you happen to watch Goose at all?
I did watch a little bit of Goose, yes. And also just in general, like so many of us, the message threads, right? Friends who were there. For me, a very active and wonderful community. The El Goose Times crew and staff has been sharing all of their experiences because they've been at these shows. And so I would say it is impossible not to know even a little bit about what's going on right now and or what's happened this week. Kevin, what do you think about what you've seen so far?
Well, I watched part of Friday, but most of Friday I spent with Billy Strings, which I do not regret at all. I fall more and more in love with that man and what he's doing every time I watch him. I thought that the I really want Goose to be a 2 guitar band with less keyboards because the Drive Yeti the first night was so just up my alley. And tonight before we started recording, they were doing Time to Fleet Open, which is another dual guitar. I don't know. I'm a fan of that Allman Brothers kind of sound. Iron
Yeah.
Maiden does it with the dual guitars.
Well, it's great when it works, and it really works for them. And I think, if nothing else, it's a very lucky thing that they have that option,
Right.
be able to go there. It's pretty
And
cool.
how about this? We run our cool bumper and then we'll get into a little more Goose. So here are
The top 3 stories of the week.
So, Kevin, I guess it would be impossible to not mention the entertainers and even sports royalty that's been in the house over this run. Mark Messier, Chelios. I mean, they're getting just some really incredible exposure. I feel like we kind of have to talk about Fallon. Do you want to get into that for a minute or two?
Yeah, I'll just say that ultimately, in the music business, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Amen.
I think Shapiro was friends with a lot of people, and yes, Jimmy Fallon came out and did his best. I want to say Jim Belushi impersonation.
Yes, I thought it was fun. I actually had a really good time also digging into the Facebook comments on the official Goose post with the video because, in some sense, you know you've made it or on your way when your fans are just ripping you apart for something fun. People have opinions.
Right. I have no issue with Jimmy Fallon coming out and singing with them in and of itself. My issue is I loathe Mustang Sally. It is the worst wedding band song besides maybe Pride and Joy ever. And I hear it and I'm like, please, God help me.
Anything but that, right? I was surprised. Now I know that Fallon's done other things, right? He's was it J Rad he had done an encore with, and just on his show in general. It seems like there's a lot of music focus all the time, but still watching Fallon get on stage and really take the vocals. I'm thinking, he was better than I thought, or that maybe anyone has a right to be that's not a professional musician. So I can't be too angry with that, and it was obvious there's a lot of energy there.
I give it 2 thumbs up. Good for them.
Me too, me too. And I'm all about, you know, sometimes the crew has to just work a little harder for a moment to pick up a mic stand or make sure that nothing gets damaged, but they were on top of it and it seemed like everything worked out. All right. So anything else you would want to, or that you saw during any of the Goose shows that you'd want to talk about? Otherwise, I've got just a couple things, maybe some of the events that happened around the official shows. But yeah, anything else, Kev, that you wanted to kind of mention you had seen musically with us?
Were you thinking about I know that Osiris did their thing today. I haven't heard any reports about that with Oberlo. Is that how he
Oh,
pronounced the
yeah.
side
So
project?
Rebelo did a Q&A session at Garcia's. Yeah, early on, I guess early Sunday. What's today? Early Sunday.
Yeah, earlier yesterday, if you're listening on Monday.
Yeah, so and it was an Osiris event, and I saw some really great video of Arevalo playing Meat, which was so
Yes.
cool. I loved that, and it sounded good. I mean, Arevalo as a three piece is just I think phenomenal, and a lot of my friends and people I know who are more on the bluegrass acoustic side of the scene absolutely love Arevalo. That's kind of a 100 percenter. People really seem to enjoy that no matter what. So that seemed fun. And then on Saturday, before the show, there was a private event that a few people I know got to go to. It was, I think it was a benefit. And there were some funny moments there. It seemed like a real personal kind of event. And so, as we kind of learn more, I'm sure some of that will come out. But I guess the theme of that story is if you could have packed as much as possible into these days, seems like they did it. Second story this week. This is something that maybe I'm just finding very interesting. The Krasno More Project. Have you heard of this, Kevin? It's a brand new musical project.
I saw an ad scrolling through Facebook, but I did not stop.
Yeah, so I guess what I find interesting. So what this is, of course, it's Galactic drummer Stanton Moore, and then solo live guitarist Eric Krasno, as well as Eric Finland, who's a keyboardist, kicked off their inaugural tour at the Ardmore Theater in Pennsylvania just this last weekend. And I guess the reason that this is news to me is because these are already very busy people.
Let's do something else, right?
And I thought, that just goes to show that maybe it's just never enough and there's always something fun out there. But the show, from all accounts, was fantastic, a mix of funk, jams, every member of that trio kind of getting things done, and the crowd, from what I can understand, was just really fantastic. So that is one to watch. I'm curious how much they'll be touring.
How many times do we see these projects appear in their couple shows in an album kind of thing,
Yeah. Well, I think that they're going to try to do as much as they can in between other tours. So Danny Meyer from Star Kitchen joined as well. So we'll put some info up. They did a bunch of covers. They did some Allman Brothers, Garcia Band, in addition to some instrumentals. So yeah, something fun, something new. And our third story of the week, The Cure had put out a tour announcement late last week that there will be no platinum or dynamically priced tickets on this particular tour. And now they've released a follow up statement about policies put in place to protect fans against unfair ticketing practices and scalpers. So this might be one of the first opportunities to see what, if anything, that actually does.
I saw people go back and refer to Pearl Jam trying to fight them at String Cheese Incident, but I don't think either one of those bands has the pull that The Cure does. I mean, this I've seen them 7 times since 1989, and I will be there again this summer. The interesting thing is if you look at the venues, it's MPP. It's I think Blossom's on there. It's the ones that are outside the Live Nation network. And also the thing with they mentioned cash and trade and, selling them through the Ticketmaster, site. My whole thing is as long as they allow you to price it as you want below. I know you can't price it over, but what if there's a glut of tickets and you get stuck with it? I want to be able to at least say, hey, I'll take 25 instead of 50,
Right.
kind of thing. But I guess with cash or trade or the other site they mentioned, you can do that because cash or trade, you set your own price.
Right, absolutely. And I think, if nothing else, that announcement from The Cure is also having another reaction or another effect, which is for live music fans to say, wait a second, we didn't even realize it was possible to do something like this, right? And so maybe it just helps further the conversation of putting pressure on artists too, to some degree,
Right.
or at least the conversation maybe changes a little bit.
Right. My first thought is why wasn't Fish or Goose or some jam band at the forefront? But maybe I answered my own question with The Cure are bigger than most bands, are bigger than Fish. I mean, if you ask 10 people in the street, 7 of them probably will have heard Just Like Heaven or know something about The Cure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, their reach and just generally speaking, the so many years they've had of kind of being just such a name probably does make this something that's a little bit more plausible for them. So I'm just going to keep a watch on it, like everything else. I definitely have some friends who are huge fans, and of course they're very proud, and they should be, that any band is doing something to try to make some changes.
They're worth seeing.
Yes, 100%.
So, all right, so let's jump into this interview. The first thing that we talked about with him was the fact that I reached out to him and he was like, why is it something with jam bands reaching out to me? And so I asked him about that. We talked a little bit about that, and he got into the first time he saw a jam band. And it's a really funny story. So let's check it out, and we'll see you on the other side. This week we are speaking with Walter Salas-Humara from the Silos. Their latest release, Family, continues to innovate the groundbreaking Americana sound he first formulated almost 40 years ago. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to you too.
How are we doing? All right. Beforehand, we were talking about jam bands, so let's get back into the phenomena of jam bands. And just you were saying that.
I was saying, well, what I was saying was that when you contacted me, I was like, this a jam band podcast is contacting me. Isn't this interesting? Because I never thought of the Silos as a jam band or being part of that scene at all. I mean, the Silos started in the 80s and before what I would call the kind of neo hippie movement of, I guess, the 90s, right? I know those bands were around in the 80s.
I call it, I always center it back to the wetlands from like 89 to 93 is what,
okay.
Is where the fertile ground was that let all this happen.
So did like Widespread and Fish and all those bands play at the Wetlands?
Yeah, they all went
They
through
did.
there in the late
Okay, cool.
80s,
Yeah, yeah.
early
All right.
90s.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And then they all hit the, what I call, they took the next step. They started doing small theaters. So you aren't
Yeah,
playing a place like the Wetlands
sure. Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. I mean, we played the Wetlands in the 90s. But I didn't even get it that it was a jam band place. Maybe I sort of got it.
Like
Anyway,
God Street Wine, like, a band like God Street Wine,
oh
they
yeah,
were
yeah,
considered a
yeah.
jam band, but
Okay.
they were the good songwriter. I mean, their songwriting was exemplary. Lou Faber is a fantastic lyricist.
Right.
So
Right. Well, I guess, what I was, I thought of the jam band scene as I just didn't get it. I was like, I didn't get why it had grown to such incredible popularity, and certain bands were massive, but I didn't get it because I never went to those concerts, because I would go, what's up with this Widespread Panic, and I would listen to a recording of a studio recording of them, and I would just like, I don't get it. I don't get why these guys are so popular. Like they're okay, but they're not, but they're not as good. Of course, you always compare, to other artists of the genre. You compare, and so of course, myself, especially since I grew up in the South, I compare them to the Allman Brothers or whatever. They're just like, they just pale in comparison to that. But that's my opinion, of course. But
I think part of it is, kids, an 18-year-old kid out of high school, they see Fish is touring for the summer, right? And it's like the last great American adventure that you hit the road and you go see 6 or
yeah,
7
right. See, I didn't
shows.
get any of that. I didn't get that. I really didn't get it. That it wasn't until I moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, 14 years ago, that I started, that is the scene there. That's the only scene, pretty much. I mean, there's a few other scenes there, but the jam band scene is pretty much dominant. And I started going to those concerts, and I was like, oh, I mean, my story I always tell is like basically the first jam band concert I went to in Flagstaff. I'm standing there, listening to the band or whatever, dancing around a little bit, and there's like a 70-year-old man next to me dancing around, and he offered me some LSD, just as like this kind of nice gesture, and I was like, wow.
What decade am I in? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I was like, what? This is crazy. Like, I felt like that was in high school again. And I look over, and there was like an 18-year-old kid on the other side of me, and I was like, this is so amazing. Like, such a great, like, how great is this? Like, that there's that wide of an age group. Because like, the indie rock scene, or the kind of scene that I saw us as a part of, was nothing like that. It was, very exclusive. And this jam band scene, I was realizing, was very inclusive. Like, it didn't matter to the people what the style of music was. It was just kind of the attitude of the band.
Right.
And then the fact that all of their friends were going to be at this concert. And it was going to be really open-minded type people. Of course, there's going to be, partying, and all that, which there sort of is at every kind of concert, pretty much. But it was just like kind of a happy, festive vibe. It's not an overly intellectualized in any way,
Right.
specific way, and certainly very unpretentious and very, hey, everybody's welcome kind of situation.
Right.
And it was great. I was like, fuck, this is great. I should have been.
Where was I?
I should have tried to move the silos into this, not into this musical, because it doesn't matter the music you're playing. Just try to get that type of audience involved.
Yeah. You also mentioned about record label. You owned your own record label. You've been signed to independent major labels. You've seen the music industry go from the record CD being the primary product to streaming. is now the method of distribution.
Yeah.
Where do you see things going
in the future from here?
Yeah, or is the streaming model sustainable for artists?
Oh, they won't need artists in the future. They'll have computers making everything.
Right, the AI.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of grim.
Yeah. I don't know. Who knows? It might not be so bad. I don't know.
Right, so that's where the jam bands are going to save it. Band fans won't accept that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't know. I think there'll always be, people bucking the trend or whatever. But
you always have live music, I guess. I mean, if an AI can write a song, but can an AI go out and perform a song?
Well, I mean, if you think about what the state of live music on the big pop scale, it's not real. It's not very real.
No.
You know what I mean? I mean, the jam band scene is totally real.
And like there's some of the indie stuff, the emo scene.
The indie stuff, yeah, of course, in the club scene and all that. Yeah. But in terms of big shows, there's a lot of pre-recorded and sequenced, and and it's not, and those shows are not. I mean, that environment is not necessarily about the music anyway. There's a whole fashion thing, involved in the dancing, and that's the real part. The real part.
It's more Broadway than rock and roll.
Yeah, it is very much so. Yeah, even the rock and roll type shows are like that.
So, Kevin, this entire AI topic now has come up a couple times and in different formats, but it seems like it is something that is really on people's minds. So I think this is just another kind of indicator that we're going to want to keep a watch on where that's popping up, and even just our perceptions of what it can or cannot do. Before we get back into the interview, want to just remind everyone that we are on all social media outlets at All That Jam Pod. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, allthatjampod.com. And we really would appreciate likes and follows. I feel like lately we've been seeing a lot of great reshares and really seeing some good uptake on a lot of the things that we're posting. Make sure to give us your 5 stars and reviews wherever you get your podcasts as well. And Kevin, I think we're going to get back into this interview a little bit, right?
What we have coming up next is he started telling me about people auditioning for the bass player spot in the Silos. And 2 of the names that came up were Fred Smith and Sara Lee, who ended up being in the B-52s, which I found fascinating. So let's check that out, and we'll talk to you on the other side. Yeah. Did you ever meet Tom Verlaine? I guess you guys
never met the guy. No, I never did meet him. I mean, I played many shows with Richard Lloyd, and he's on some Silos records.
Yeah,
and I got some great Richard Lloyd stories. And Fred, the bass player, he auditioned for one of our tours back in the Bird tour, because JD Foster, who played on the album, was not. He was was some sort of point in his life where he didn't really want to tour right then, and so we had to audition some bass players for that tour, and because we had a lot of label support, we were actually able to pay everybody.
Right.
So we could we're like, let's ask this person or that, let's ask Sara Lee if she wants to come down and audition, or let's ask Fred Smith, and let's ask
you asked Fred Smith,
maybe, and whatever.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Fred came down, and Fred I don't know what was going on with Fred at that time, or what was going on with television at that time. I think nothing really. I mean, I guess I don't know.
They stopped. They got back together in '91. I think is when they decided to start touring again, and they stopped in '86 or '87.
Okay, so this was 1990 that I'm talking about. So this was before their kind of reemergence, and they did that third album, right?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, I call Fred. Somehow somebody gives me Fred's number, and I call Fred, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to come down, blah, blah. He's like, but I don't have a bass. I was like, you don't have a bass? You're fucking Fred Smith from television. Like, how can you not have a fucking bass? What the hell's going on here? I mean, I didn't say that, of
Right.
course. I was like, yeah, no worries. Yeah, we'll find you bass, whatever, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, he came down. He was kind of out of it. We didn't know what to make of him. Because Sarah Lee came in and was killing it, and then Graham Mamie comes in as like, one of the greatest bass players ever, right? I was like, fuck, man, why would he want to play with him?
Right. This one looks cool. This is my ad.
And then we were gonna get Sarah Lee to do the tour because we thought it'd be cool to have her. She was super cool. She's really nice, and I mean Graham is too. He's the nicest guy ever. And Fred is too, I guess, but she got the gig with the B-52s, so
that was that.
So she had to pass. We had to settle for Graham Maybe. He's
Right.
like one of the greatest bass players ever,
and it worked.
Kevin, even with an interview like this, which really isn't something that I knew a ton about, which is great because I got to learn, you just can't ever be surprised at people knowing each other in the music industry. And that's one thing that I love about it, and yet always still kind of amazes me. So really great interview. And I think it's fantastic that, number one, we can reach out beyond just the traditional jam band scene and bring people in a little bit too, maybe. So love that interview. The other thing we wanted to chat about tonight just came up recently. And, for both of us being real connected in different ways, things pop up. And so a friend of mine, Sara Mount, who is a local musician, we've actually had her on the show as well. She's the representative for the Colorado Musicians Union. She had shared something on her Facebook page. And what it was, we'll have to share it again if we haven't, but it's a kind of a comic, and it's a Trojan horse. And up at the top in the head is a jam band, funk band, and they're charging the gates, and everybody's excited. And then inside the horse, what you have is the actual jazz musicians. And so she shared it because she is very much a more classically trained jazz saxophonist. And I noticed that a lot of the comments to her post were from other traditionally trained, maybe more classic jazz artists themselves. And they were kind of lamenting this. And I thought to myself, well, that's an interesting perspective. Where would I be without some of the jam bands that are kind of sequestered in that jazz funk category? We've had some on this show and more to come. And so I shared it, and I wanted to know what people thought. Maybe no surprise for our audience and listenership. Everyone thinks it's great because they said our worlds have been enriched by the gateway bands. So just
Definitely.
thought something that's interesting, right?
I found the Grateful Dead when I was little, and read up on them. And Phil Lesh says, "Oh, we based Dark Star on Africa Brass by John Coltrane." So I go and buy that album. All of a sudden, I'm listening to jazz. Garcia says, "I loved bluegrass. I used to go tape bluegrass all the time." I'm listening to bluegrass because I want to know. I'm very much into where did something come from? By the questions I always ask. What's your process?
Absolutely. And I think that is something that is really magical about the jam band scene.
That's the beauty of it. And with that, we're going to say good night, good morning, good afternoon, and we will see you next week. We have RJB coming up next week. Then on Tuesday, we have Gorilla Toss. They have a show coming up at Tree Fort Music Festival. So we're going to hear a little bit about them playing before Dead and Company and Fish at Bethel last year. On Wednesday, we're going to have Richard Fury from the Buffalo Springfield talking a little bit about his newest album in the country. On Thursday, we have a little piece about Alan Evans. And on Friday, we have George Porter about his upcoming documentary. Then our preview of the interview coming after RJ is our man, Scott Sherrod from Little Feat. So that is going to be just wow.
Very cool. Got a lot going on.
And with that, I will say, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. I'll see you next week, Amanda.
All right, Kevin.